On the 3rd of April 2021, the city of Cairo hosted a regal parade. 22 Egyptian royals were driven in golden carriages heralded by celebrants in traditional costume. Given the name and nature of my channel, and the fact that Egypt is a republic, you've probably already put together that these royals are long dead. Though the kings and queens being paraded were not on open display, they each had their own conveyance proudly showing their names. They're all New Kingdom monarchs and royal wives. Well, almost. The frontmost carriage bore Sekenenre Ta'a, who predated the New Kingdom, but only just considering his son founded it. There were probably names you've heard of in this parade. Numerous Thutmoses, the most famous probably being the conqueror Thutmose III, his stepmother and one-time co-monarch, the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, Amenhotep III, whose city, dazzling Aten, is being unearthed outside of Luxor even as I write this. Seti I, whose name launched 1,000 conspiracy theories, and who is the father of Ramesses the Great. Ramesses the Great, favourite of Percy Shelley, victor of the Battle of Kadesh, and builder of almost everything in ancient Egypt you've ever heard of that isn't a pyramid. In fact, Ramesses 2 through 6 are all there, and 9 for good measure. The parade was a functional event with ceremony thrown in. The mummies were being moved to their new forever home, the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. There, they reside in a dedicated gallery and will receive all appropriate conservation. The parade wasn't half-hearted. Accompanied by the United Philharmonic Orchestra, singers Amira Salim, Raham Abdel Hakim and Nesma Margoub performed in Arabic and Egyptian, including songs written with excerpts from the Book of the Dead. The 40-minute parade route was lined with costumed celebrants bearing lights to guide the mummies on their way. At monument sites throughout Egypt, actors and dancers performed mesmerising scenes in tribute to the ancient kings, and having received a 21-gun salute from the Republican Guard, the royals were formally welcomed by President Sisi to their new home. It was a fantastically, fascinatingly, wonderfully melodramatic event. A friend asked me what the pharaohs themselves would have thought about it all. After all, while I called the National Museum their forever home, they all had a forever home already. Wouldn't they prefer to be back in their tombs? Even if the name of the game is conservation and a hint of reverence, wouldn't true respectfulness entail returning them to the sarcophagi that once bore them? To answer that question, we have to look at the history of these mummies. This isn't the first time they've been moved, or the second, or the third. In fact, for most of them, their history of being transported to a new site for conservation goes back to the dwindling days of the very nation they ruled. Ancient Egypt's 3 so-called Golden Ages were broken up by intermediate periods. During these times, the central government more or less ceased to exist. In some cases, Egypt would revert to its many nomarchs for localised governance, and in others, the traditional kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt would end up with 2 separate dynasties of pharaohs. If you watched my overview of the Egyptian military, you'll remember me alluding to the fact that the strong, tiny central government was both ancient Egypt's great strength and most damning vulnerability. All infrastructure assumed the presence of a singular palace government. Without that, the economy would begin to fracture, and people would suffer. Bearing in mind that a lot of the time the Egyptian state was most under threat because of some natural event such as low flood levels causing a famine, and you can see how poverty becomes a driving factor in the population's behaviour. One of the signs of this, consistent across all of the intermediate periods, was an increase in tomb robbing. Although the kings of the New Kingdom were generally buried in secret sites in the Valley of the Kings, with their mortuary altars being in grand temples far away, they were still susceptible. In the early days of what we call the Third Intermediate Period, many royal mummies were moved from their original tombs to a site in the Theban necropolis, to keep them out of the reach of tomb robbers, and so that restoration work could be done on their tombs. Another site nearby, a tomb within the Valley of the Kings in fact, became a cache for royal mummies, including Amenhotep III at around the same time. So we can't really say that the idea of officialdom breaking open tombs and moving the mummies with a higher purpose in mind than curiosity is a modern innovation. Of course, as history goes, none of them would ever be returned to their tombs. Somewhat ironically, the main royal cache at Deir el-Bahri was discovered by a tomb robber in the 19th century. In 1881, a man named Abd el-Rasul, who had been plundering tombs for a few years, found a new target and, along with his brother, set about continuing their very profitable work. When I say profitable, I mean it. Egyptomania was in full swing in the 1880s. A Book of the Dead from the site sold for what would be equivalent to about £30,000 in today's money, that's about $40,000. In typical 19th century fashion, when officialdom learned of the trove, they gutted it, hastily and without either properly documenting its contents or taking care when transporting them. It also became clear that Abd el-Rasul and his brother were not the first robbers to find these remains, because several of the mummies had been long ago broken or placed in the wrong coffins, as past generations of scoundrels had rooted around for jewellery and other profitable articles. Now, the mummies are respected. Archaeologists in the 21st century are much more inclined to remember that, however ancient, they are human remains. Moreover, they are a valuable part of Egyptian history, and while perhaps there are few better places for ancient artifacts than deep beneath the earth in dry, stale, dark conditions, that assumes that there won't be robbers to disturb them one day, when in actual fact, the tombs of Egypt, even going all the way back to the end of the Old Kingdom, have never been all that secure. The National Museum, on the other hand, not only prioritises preservation and restoration, but security. I can't help but think that the most important thing to the pharaohs of old, whose bodies were so reverently transported that warm April night, is that although we don't know exactly how their names are pronounced, we're still speaking them. We're still learning of and teaching about their lives and deeds. We're treating them not simply as curiosities or relics, but as men and women who lived, who join the Egyptian people now to their ancient past. And which of us will be able to say the same 3,000 years after we're gone? I've put a link to the parade footage in the description below, including a timestamp for when the parade itself begins. It's pretty captivating, and I hope you find the time to experience it. Just a note, I've found the best quality footage I could with the most audio and subtitles in English, but me sharing that link isn't an endorsement of the uploading channel in general. What do you think? Would the pharaohs approve of the way modern Egyptians honour them, or would they rather have been left alone than honoured at all? I'll see you next time, my fellow armchair Egyptologists, and until then, to you all and to the pharaohs of old, life, prosperity and health. Thanks for watching. Head over to my channel for more, or click here to see what the YouTube demons think you should watch next. I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you'd like to support and collaborate on the channel with me, go to patreon.com/armchairegypt. You can also join my Discord community, there's an invite link in the description.